At the Lowcountry Children's Hospital Gala, a woman sat in a black wheelchair at the edge of the ballroom, near the dessert table. Two guests walked past without looking at her. A man in a tuxedo placed his empty champagne flute into her hand, mistaking her for staff. She accepted it without expression. The side door opened. A man in a worn jacket entered with his 8-year-old son. He stopped. He looked at her, not the chair. He crossed the room, pulled out a chair and said, "My boy is about to murder a pecan pie. Join us." She rolled forward. Before we go further, hit the subscribe button below and let us know in the comments where you are watching from tonight. 2 weeks before the gala, on a Tuesday afternoon in October, Dawson Reed was bent over a long oak table in a workshop at the back end of a narrow lot off Dorchester Road, in the quieter half of North Charleston. Sawdust caught the late light. 3 folders lay open in front of him. The top folder was labeled, "Reed Adaptive Renovations. RFP Response. Ellsworth Heritage Hotel." The bid was due in 9 days. He had walked the lobby and second floor of the hotel the week before, as a curious tourist, sketching pinch points on a paper map he kept folded in his jacket pocket. Now he was translating those scribbles into a clean schematic. Door widths, threshold heights, sightlines from the seated position of someone 3 feet tall. In the corner, near the small heater that wheezed on cold mornings, his 8-year-old son Eli was building a Lego crane with a working pulley. He had been at it for 2 hours and had spoken roughly 4 sentences. "Dad," he said, "does the rope go on the top wheel or the bottom wheel?" Dawson looked up. "Top, then bottom, then back to the top. That is a lot of going. That is how cranes work, buddy." Eli nodded with the seriousness of a man receiving instructions on a submarine and went back to threading the string. The dog, a 14-year-old lab mix named Bear, sighed from beneath the table. Above the workshop pegboard, half hidden behind a row of clamps, sat a framed certificate turned face down against the wall. Beside it, on the shelf, a stack of engineering journals, still wrapped in their original mailing plastic. Subscriptions Dawson had not canceled and had not opened for nearly 4 years. His phone rang. He glanced at the screen. Lowcountry Children's Hospital, Development Office, Dawson Reed. "Mr. Reed, it is Marisa from the gala team. The roll-in shower bench you donated for the Halloran family. We are featuring it in the donation showcase Friday night. We would love to have you bring it over personally. There is a place at the family table for Eli, too." Dawson rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Marisa, I am not really a gala guy. It would mean a lot to the Hallorans." He looked at Eli, who had now produced a working pulley and was clearly waiting to demonstrate it. Then he looked briefly at the folder labeled Ellsworth on the table. The hotel hosting the gala was the same hotel he was bidding on. He could walk the public spaces in a borrowed tuxedo without anyone asking what he was looking at. "All right," he said. "We will be there." Friday came overcast. Eli stood in front of the bathroom mirror, fighting a bow tie the rental shop had mailed in a size only slightly too stiff. Dawson knotted it for him with hands that remembered the motion from his own wedding. On his left ring finger, the worn band caught the bathroom light. He had never taken it off. They drove east, over the Cooper River, the bridge cables ticking past the truck window like a metronome. When the columned facade of the Ellsworth Heritage Hotel came into view on East Bay Street, Dawson slowed. His eyes traveled across the front steps, the brass-railed entrance, the narrow side service door. He counted 3 places where the accessible route had been hidden so well it had stopped being accessible. He said nothing. Eli was practicing his bow-tie smile. That same Friday morning, across the harbor in the Ellsworth Tower penthouse on Meeting Street, Margot Ellsworth was already at her desk by 7. Her chief of staff, Hadley Allard, came in with 2 coffees and a printed timeline. "Cocktail at 6:30, Hadley said, sliding the page across. "Opening remarks at 7:45. Dinner at 8. You can read your speech and be back in the car by 9 if you want." Margot looked at her. "I am the host. I am not hiding." Hadley did not argue. She had been chief of staff for 11 months. She had learned which battles Margot lost gracefully and which she did not lose at all. For half a second, while Hadley reviewed the donor seating chart, Margot was not in the penthouse. She was in the cabin of a 30-foot sailboat off Sullivan's Island. 6 years and 2 months earlier, hearing the wrong sound, feeling the boom swing the wrong way, watching the white sail eclipse the August sun. Then she was in a hospital ceiling tile, counting the holes. Then she was back in the penthouse, and Hadley was asking whether she wanted the lavender suit or the navy. Navy, she said. She had been chief executive for 14 months. Gallus remained the hardest spaces, not because of the wheelchair, but because of the way Charleston society looked through her when she entered a room. She had developed a habit. 15 minutes before her speech, she would peel away from the donor cluster and roll to a quiet corner near the dessert tables. She called it reading the room. It was also, she knew, hiding in plain sight. That night, she did exactly that. In the 12 minutes she spent at the edge of the ballroom, 3 people mistook her for staff. One handed her a coat. One asked where the restroom was. The third, a man in a tuxedo holding a champagne flute by the rim, set the empty glass into her hand without looking down, and kept walking. She had just settled the glass on the table beside her when the side door opened. The man in the worn jacket walked in carrying the shower bench wrapped in protective plastic. He handed it off to a coordinator. Then he turned and saw the moment. The empty glass. The polite face. Something tightened in his chest. He crossed the room. He did not say, "Let me help." He said, "There is a table over there with 2 chairs and a piece of pecan pie my boy is about to murder. Join us." She looked at him long enough to know he was not pitying her. She rolled forward. For 10 minutes they sat. Eli asked her about the rear wheel camber on her chair, the way a small boy asks about a Mars rover. She answered him as if he were a junior engineer. Dawson did not ask what she did. He asked which piece of the string quartet she liked best. She said the Dvorak. He said he had never had an opinion about Dvorak, and asked her to teach him one. At 7:43 the ballroom lights dimmed. The master of ceremonies stepped to the podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our gracious host this evening, the Chief Executive Officer of Ellsworth Hospitality Group, Margot Ellsworth." The room turned. Heads found their table. Margot set her napkin down. "Excuse me, gentlemen," she said, and rolled toward the stage. Dawson did not move. Eli, mouthful of pie, looked up. "Daddy, was that her?" Dawson did not answer. He was watching the chair roll away from him. His eyes had found the small machined logo on the rear frame. He knew that logo. He had drawn it. The letters etched into the aluminum read M Active 03/D.R. Saturday morning came too early. Dawson was in the workshop by 5:30, before Eli was awake, before Bear had stirred from the rug. He stood in front of the pegboard and lifted the framed certificate down from the shelf where it had spent the last 4 years facing the wall. Georgia Institute of Technology, School of Mechanical Engineering, the Sinclair Foundation Adaptive Design Fellowship, awarded to Dawson M. Reed, 2010. He set it on the workbench, glass up. Then he opened the bottom drawer of the file cabinet. He had not opened it since the spring he moved out of the company apartment in Atlanta. Inside, hardbound notebooks, sketch pads, a stack of patent filings paper clipped together. The top filing was titled Active Frame Wheelchair System. Application 14-8-82-401. Inventor, D. Reed. He sat with the folder on his lap for a long time. Pieces came back, not in order. 2013. The porch in Decatur. Hannah on the wicker swing with the diagnosis still folded in her purse, saying, "Just promise me you will keep making things, Dawes." 2014. The lab at Meridian Mobility. The prototype frame on a test rig. The engineering team passing him a marker so he could sign the first clean drawing. 2015. Hannah herself in the prototype, laughing because for the first time in 2 years, she could pivot in her own kitchen without scraping the cabinet. 2019. The third-generation chair beneath her in a hospital room with the curtain drawn. 2020. The spring after Hannah. The meeting with the Meridian General Counsel who said, very gently, that under the original work-for-hire language he had signed in 2012, the company would be retaining all rights and was not obligated to keep his name on the new marketing. He had signed the exit papers. He had taken his wedding ring off the workbench where he had set it that morning, slipped it back on, and not removed it again. He looked now at the patent drawing on the top sheet, the rear frame geometry, the bevel on the camber tube, the small machined recess where the model designation was etched. It was the same chair Margot Ellsworth had been sitting in. A footstep behind him. "Daddy." Eli was in the doorway, dragging his blanket. hair on the wrong side of his head. "Why are you up so early?" "Just looking at some old work, buddy." "Was it good work?" Dawson closed the folder. It was honest work. That afternoon, a courier delivered a small envelope to the workshop. Cream paper. A handwritten address. To Master Eli Reed, care of Reed Adaptive Renovations. Inside, a card in a steady, slanted hand. "Dear Eli, thank you for explaining cambered wheels to me on Friday. I learned more in 10 minutes than I did in my last engineering consult. I am sending along a book that I think you will enjoy. Tell your father the pecan pie was the best decision I made all night. Margaret E." Beneath the card, a hardback children's book on robotics, the kind a person bought from an actual bookstore. Dawson held the card a long time. He read it twice. Then he walked back to the bench and slid the M-Active patent folder into the drawer. He did not change a single number on the bid that was already in Margot's RFPQ. He did not add a line about Georgia Tech, or Meridian, or who had designed the chair beneath her. He let the proposal stand exactly as it was. 3 weeks after the gala, on a wet morning in early November, Hadley Allard walked into Margot's office with 3 thin folders and set them on the desk. "Final 3 for the site walkthroughs," she said. "Phelan Brothers, McAllister and Vance, and a small firm called Reed Adaptive Renovations out of North Charleston. Reed, you will not have heard of them. 2 employees, including the principal. Testimonials are unusual. I called 2 of his former clients on Friday, both of them spinal cord. Both of them said the same thing, which was that he did not push the chair, did not open the door early, and ask the right questions." Margot picked up the folder. Schedule him last. The Reed walkthrough was set for the following Wednesday at 10. At 9:55, Margot rolled into the lobby of the Ellsworth Heritage Hotel and saw, standing near the front desk in a clean work jacket, the man from the gala. He looked up. He did not look surprised exactly. He looked like a man who had been preparing for the door to open. "Mr. Reed, Miss Ellsworth." They shook hands. Hadley, watching from 20 feet back, exhaled very quietly. The walkthrough lasted 90 minutes. Margot rolled. Dawson walked. He did not push the chair. He did not open doors before she reached them. He did not offer to take notes for her. He asked, 3 different times, where exactly she felt the pinch points she had learned to absorb without comment, and he made marks on a paper map every time she answered. They argued, briefly, about the service elevator. He had proposed moving it 8 feet to the south. She had proposed leaving it where it was and rebuilding the corridor. She was right. He saw it on the second look and said so without apologizing for missing it the first time. They were standing in the second-floor west corridor when Russell Pemberton appeared at the end of the hallway with another man in a blazer. "Margaret." Russell crossed the corridor in long strides. He was 62, silver-haired, expensive without being interesting. The man in the blazer behind him was younger, mid-30s, with the careful posture of someone who knew he was overhearing things he should not. "This must be your renovator," Russell said, looking at Dawson. He extended his hand without quite looking at it. "Russell Pemberton, board member. I have been telling Margot that this whole project is a very expensive way to make a personal statement. I am sure you can deliver it for less than she thinks." Dawson shook his hand once. "The bid is the bid," he said. Russell smiled the way a man smiles when he has not been agreed with. "We will see." He turned to Margot. "I am bringing in Crescent Build Group on Friday for a comparison number. You will like the savings." He walked off. The man in the blazer behind him followed, but as he turned, his eyes met Dawson's for 1 fraction of a second. Dawson registered the face. He had supervised the man on a CAD team at Meridian Mobility. 4 years earlier, he had liked him then. The man's name was Andrew Pratt. Andrew Pratt did not nod. He kept walking. When the corridor was empty, Margot said quietly, "Most contractors would have agreed with him to keep the contract." Dawson said, "Most contractors do not have to look in the mirror." She rolled away first, so he would not see the small smile. 5 weeks after the gala, on a Thursday night, Margot was the last person in the Ellsworth Tower. The cleaning crew had gone home. The donor wing on the 42nd floor was dark. She was at her desk with a single lamp on and the Reed Adaptive proposal in front of her. The bid was tight. The numbers were honest. The construction calendar was conservative. None of that was what had kept her in the office at 10 on a Thursday. It was the first sentence. Universal access is not adaptation. It is original architecture. She had read that sentence before. She knew she had. She did not know where. She opened her laptop and logged into the Ellsworth Foundation archive. The family fund her grandfather had started in 1958, which had absorbed the Sinclair Foundation when her father had married her mother, and which she now chaired in addition to the company. She searched the academic grants ledger, 2010. Sinclair Foundation Adaptive Design Fellowship. Georgia Institute of Technology. Recipient. Redacted under settlement. 2021. She frowned at the screen. Redactions in the family ledger were rare, and usually meant a legal entanglement that had outlasted whoever had cared about it. She switched to the academic database she had paid for in her recovery year. She searched the fellowship by year and discipline. She found a dissertation. The author was not named. The first sentence of the abstract read, "Universal access is not adaptation. It is original architecture." She closed the laptop. She did not search further. She had decided, in the time it took to slide the screen down, that she wanted to hear the rest from him. She rolled to the window. The Cooper River bridge cables made a long curve of light against the dark sky. She had read that abstract once, when she was 25 at Georgetown. A boy she had known then, the younger brother of a girlfriend, had used a wheelchair. She had been looking on his behalf. For someone who wrote about disability the way her father wrote about hotels, as a thing to design beautifully, not adapt apologetically. She had read the abstract and remembered the sentence and forgotten the name. She had been moving through the world, she realized, on the work of a stranger for a long time. She thought of her father at his desk in the third-floor study of the family house on the Battery, signing checks for foundations whose recipients he would never meet. She had asked him once how he chose. He had told her he chose the ones who would never ask. That same night, on Daniel Island, Eli sat at the kitchen table with 3 Lego pieces and a half-built robot in front of him. He had been quiet for a stretch. "Dad." "Yes, buddy. Do you think she is sad?" Dawson set the dish towel down on the counter. He thought about it carefully. "No, I do not think she is sad. I think she is careful. Like Mom was. Mom was sad sometimes. Mom was sad sometimes. But mostly, Mom was careful." Eli took this in. He picked up a small motor and snapped it onto the base of the robot. "I think Margot is careful too," he said. Dawson rinsed the dish. He did not turn around right away. He was not sure his face was prepared. In the silence of his workshop later, with the proposal printout in front of him and Hannah's photograph on the shelf, he understood that he had not put the certificate back face down. It was still on the bench, glass up. He let it stay. 8 weeks after the gala, in the second week of January, the Ellsworth Hospitality Group Board convened on the 45th floor of the Ellsworth Tower at 10 in the morning. There were 11 members at the table. Russell Pemberton sat 3 seats from the head. Margot sat at the head. Hadley sat behind her, against the wall, with a leather folder she had been preparing for 10 days. Russell opened. "I want to thank Margot for the work she has done in a very difficult 14 months. I also want to be honest with this board, because we owe each other honesty. Over the last year, I have been concerned about the direction of the Heritage Hotel renovation. I have had those concerns confirmed by Financial Review. As of last Tuesday, I and 3 other minority shareholders representing 14.8% of the equity have signed a joint motion of no confidence in the current chief executive." The room did not move. "In addition," he said, "I am introducing an alternative proposal for the renovation. Crescent Build Group, 22% lower. Same scope. I would like the board to consider both proposals in light of the no confidence motion." Margot folded her hands. "Before we vote," she said, "I would like to walk the board through the current renovation contract one more time. The principal designer is on site downstairs. I have asked him to come up." The board exchanged glances. Hadley left the room and returned a minute later with Dawson, who came in carrying a single binder. He had borrowed his good jacket again. He looked, in the boardroom mirror behind the head of the table, exactly like what Russell wanted him to look like. He presented for 4 minutes. He did not raise his voice. He did not introduce himself beyond his name. He spoke about load-bearing constraints on the second-floor west corridor. He spoke about the cost of moving an elevator versus rebuilding around it. He spoke about the projected occupancy lift across 2 market segments the Heritage Hotel had never been able to serve. The numbers were unflashy. They were correct. When he finished, Russell smiled. "Mr. Reed, I appreciate the presentation. I am sure you are a fine small contractor, but we have a comparison bid that is meaningfully more affordable. Would you care to comment?" Dawson opened his mouth to answer. A chair at the far end of the table scraped back. Wendell Hartigan stood up. Wendell was 56. A senior vice president at Meridian Mobility, an industry advisor Margot had brought onto the board 6 months earlier for exactly the kind of consultation no one had expected him to provide today. He had been quiet through the entire meeting. "Before this board votes," he said, "the members should know a fact that Meridian Mobility's general counsel confirmed to me at 9:15 this morning. The Crescent Build Group proposal incorporates 3 pinch principles that are protected under patents in the M-Active series, filed under researcher initials D.R. between 2013 and 2017. Meridian has not licensed those principles to Crescent. I would ask Mr. Reed to confirm whether he is in fact the D.R. on those patents." The room was still. Dawson said, "Yes, I am." Russell's face did not move. Then it did. The color went out of it in a way that could not be hidden. Wendell slid a folder down the long table toward the chair of the board. "This is the patent infringement documentation," he said. "The vote of no confidence cannot proceed on the basis of a comparison bid that will be subject to litigation within the week." The motion was withdrawn in under 10 minutes. Russell was the first person out of the room. The boardroom emptied slowly. Hadley closed her folder, stood near the wall a moment, and slipped out behind the last of the board members. The big door clicked shut. The fluorescent light hummed. Margot and Dawson were the only 2 people left at the long table. Margot did not say thank you. She said, "You sat at my table that night. You sat at mine." For a while, neither of them spoke. The Charleston light was coming through the long west window in a flat winter wash that turned the room the color of old paper. "How long," she finally asked, "have you known I was sitting in your chair?" "Since the gala." "You did not say." "It did not seem like mine to say." She looked down at the rear frame of her own chair, the brushed aluminum where the small etching was hidden under her elbow. "My father commissioned it," she said, "through Meridian, in 2019. After my accident, he never told me who designed it. I think he did not want me to feel that I owed anyone anything." Dawson nodded slowly. "He funded my fellowship at Georgia Tech in 2010. Sinclair Foundation." "I know. I found the redaction last week. I knew the sentence in your proposal before I knew the name." "What sentence?" "The first one. I read your dissertation when I was 25. There was a boy in my class at Georgetown who used a chair. I was looking for something to read that did not talk about him as if he were broken. I found you. I never knew your name because the publication used initials. I remembered the first sentence." Dawson set his hands flat on the table. "My wife," he said. "Hannah. She had MS. She was the one who told me to keep making things. I designed the first frame for her. I designed the 3rd generation for her too, although by then she was too sick to use it for long. She tested the brake tension herself, even when her hands could only close halfway. She wanted the data clean. She would not let me grade her grip out of pity. The chair," she said toward the end, "was the only thing in our house that did not lie to her." Margot did not look away. "I am sorry. So am I. For your accident. I have stopped being sorry for it. Mostly." A pause. "I have stopped too," he said. "Mostly." He moved his hand a little closer to hers across the surface of the table. He did not touch her. He let his hand rest where it could be reached. She did not move hers away. For the second time in 2 months, they sat together without speaking. When Margot finally rolled out into the corridor, Eli was sitting on a leather bench by the elevator with Hadley, swinging his feet, eating a wrapped peppermint from the reception desk. Hadley had a coffee in one hand and a tissue she had not yet used in the other. Eli looked up. "Hi, Margot." Eli. "Do you think you might come over for spaghetti sometime?" Hadley looked at her coffee. "That is a serious invitation," Margot said. "My dad makes really good spaghetti. He puts a little bit of cinnamon in it, which sounds weird, but it is good." "That does sound weird," Margot said. "And good." Hadley let one corner of her mouth move. At the far end of the corridor, by the elevator bank, Wendell Hartigan was waiting with a topcoat over his arm. Dawson came out of the boardroom, and they met by the elevator without quite shaking hands. "Should have called you years ago," Wendell said. "I would not have answered." "I know. The elevator opened. Wendell stepped on alone, gave Dawson one short nod, and let the doors close. 3 months later, the Ellsworth Heritage Hotel was a construction site. The second-floor west corridor was open to the studs. The service elevator stayed where it was, but its shaft had been reframed to take a wider car. The lobby was a maze of plywood barriers and signs that said "Watch your step." Margot had developed a new habit. Every Thursday evening, after the contractors had gone home, she came by the hotel in jeans and a denim jacket with a paper cup of coffee from the place across the street. Not as the chief executive. As Margot, Hadley did not come with her. Dawson met her at the side door each week. Eli came when school did not have anything else to ask of him. The boy had been given a small construction helmet and a tape measure of his own, and had begun to operate the laser level under supervision. Dawson had taught him how to call out a reading. Eli had taught Margot how to fold a paper boat that would float on the cooler water at the bottom of the elevator pit. The Pemberton suit was still on a desk somewhere. It would be dismissed in May. Russell had filed it. His lawyers had filed in response, and the local press had attempted twice to turn the story into a romance. Both Margot and Dawson had declined to comment in language so flat that the third attempt had not been made. One Thursday, the rain came hard around 6. Eli, helmeted, looked up at Margot and said, "You should come over for spaghetti." Margot looked at Dawson. "He is being literal," Dawson said. "He has been waiting for the right rain." 3 days earlier, Dawson had built a low cedar ramp at his front steps. He had not told her about it. He had not told anyone about it. She rolled up the ramp easily. They ate pancakes for dinner. Eli's choice. Dawson did, in fact, put a small pinch of cinnamon into the batter. Margot tasted it, raised one eyebrow, and ate 3. Eli, halfway through the second pancake, fell asleep with his cheek on his forearm. Dawson stood without speaking, went to the couch, came back with a small wool blanket, and laid it across the boy's shoulders without lifting his head. Margot watched him do this with the careful concentration she had brought to the academic database the week she had decided to wait. Dawson and Margot sat at the kitchen table without speaking for several minutes. The rain on the porch louder than either of them. "I have never had pancakes for dinner," she said. "That is because no one has ever loved you correctly." He heard himself say it. He did not look away. She did not look away either. The rain went on. The dog made a slow circle and lay down on Eli's feet under the table. When Margot left, an hour later, she did not stay the night. She did not need to. She put one hand on Eli's shoulder where his head lay on his arm. She put the other, just for a moment, on the inside of Dawson's wrist where the pulse was. She did not say anything. He did not say anything. She rolled back down the cedar ramp into the wet street, and the porch light caught the rain on the spokes of her wheels. After she had gone, Dawson lifted Eli without waking him and carried him to bed. He sat for a long time on the edge of the boy's mattress watching him breathe. Then he went out to the workshop and turned the framed Georgia Tech certificate around so that for the first time in 4 years, it faced the room. 1 year after the gala, on the 3rd of October, the renovated Ellsworth Heritage Hotel opened to the public. The press preview was held in the new ballroom on a clear Carolina evening that smelled of harbor salt and live oak. There were 220 guests, including several donors who had been at the previous year's Children's Hospital Gala and were trying, without success, to pretend they had no memory of the woman in the wheelchair near the dessert table. Margot delivered the opening remarks from a low stage built at her height. She thanked the construction team, the design partners, the architecture firm of record, and the longtime staff who had stayed through 15 months of plywood. She did not thank her board. Then she said something that had not been on the printed program. "There is one person I would like to ask up here tonight who has been listed in the credits as lead accessibility designer. He would have preferred to remain in the credits. I am asking him up anyway. Mr. Reed." Dawson, standing near the back of the ballroom with Eli on one side of him and Hadley on the other, did not move. Eli, who had been waiting his entire life for this moment without knowing it, put 2 small hands on the small of his father's back and pushed. Dawson walked forward. He stepped up onto the low stage. He stood next to Margot. He looked at the microphone for a long second. "A building is worth what it lets people move through," he said. "Tonight, this one is finally worth what it cost." He stepped back. The room stood. The clapping took some time to find its end. It did not stay at one volume. It rolled forward from the front tables, hesitated, came back stronger from the back, and finally settled into the steady kind that meant the room had decided what it was clapping for. Dawson kept his eyes on the same point on the back wall the whole time. At a table at the back of the ballroom, Russell Pemberton sat next to a woman who had not asked who he was. He had been invited as a courtesy. He was still a minority shareholder. He had been very quiet for months. He stood, finished his water, set the glass back on the white linen, and walked out of the ballroom without making a scene. The exit was, in its way, the most adult thing he had done in 18 months. Margot stayed on the stage. She put out her hand. Dawson took it. She did not let go through the rest of the ovation. She did not let go when the band returned to the stage. She did not let go for nearly 2 minutes. At the side of the room, Hadley turned slightly, pretended to consult the seating chart, and pressed the heel of her hand into the corner of her eye. Eli, who had finished his second piece of cake, climbed up onto a chair so he could see better, which was a violation of 3 of his father's house rules, and which neither parent at this point cared about. In the city outside, the lights along the battery came on one by one along the seawall, and the Cooper River Bridge glowed slow against the dark water, and a hotel that for 112 years had refused to be entered by half its potential guests was now, quietly and at last, a building anyone could walk into, or roll into. In April, 6 months after the reopening, on a Sunday evening when the air off the harbor still carried the last cool of the winter and the first sweet of the magnolias, 3 people walked along the seawall on the battery. Eli was in front. He had grown a full inch since the reopening. He was chasing a small flock of seagulls that had no interest in being chased and were, in the way of Charleston gulls, very patient about it. Behind him, Margot rolled along the brick walkway. Dawson walked at her left, close enough to be near, far enough not to crowd. The chair was the same one she had used the night of the gala. She had been offered a new one twice and had refused both times. They had been walking together, in different versions of together, for a year now. There had been site meetings that turned into coffee, and coffee that turned into Sunday lunches. There had been the week Eli had the flu, and Margot had brought soup over every night without making a story of it. "Wen called me yesterday," Dawson said, "from Meridian. They are filing the corrected inventor record next week. Active series, generations 1 through 3. Settlement was quiet. Done. Good. Yes." A pause. A gull crossed in front of them low over the seawall, and Eli ran to shoo it. "And Georgia Tech," Margot said. "They posted the endowment on Friday. The Dawson and Hannah Reed Endowment for Adaptive Design." He had to clear his throat once before he said the name. Margot reached over and put her hand on the cuff of his jacket. "I wanted her name first," she said. "I know. Thank you." They went on for another 100 feet without speaking. A couple in their 70s passed in the other direction. The woman smiled at Margot the way one wheelchair user smiles at another, a small private nod that the rest of the world walked past without seeing. Eli came galloping back from a piling with a small spiral shell cupped in both hands. "Margot, look." He placed the shell carefully into her lap as if he were handing over a technical drawing. Margot turned the shell in her fingers. She closed her hand around it. She stopped the chair. Dawson stopped beside her. He bent down, not because she needed him to, but because somewhere in the last 15 months it had become the way they spoke to each other when something mattered. His face was now level with hers. "I never asked to be invited to anyone's table," she said. "Neither of us was looking for one." She looked at him. "I am still not asking. I know. I am just staying. I am here." Some mornings, Margot still woke up in the recovery year of 2018, the August sun on the wrong side of the bedroom window, and had to walk herself back through the calendar to today. The walk back had gotten shorter. The room she was walking back to had warmer light. The harbor light went orange behind the masts of the moored boats. Eli, 12 feet ahead, had found a second shell and was waiting for permission to bring it. Somewhere a church bell on Meeting Street rang the half-hour. Margot put the first shell in the pocket of her jacket. Dawson straightened. They went on along the seawall together. The boy ahead, the man at her left side, the woman in the chair her late father had ordered for her without ever telling her who had built it. He had not been the one inviting. She had not been the one waiting. They had only, somehow, ended up at the same table and stayed.